Welcome back to Bucket Bites on the Coaching Bucket channel. Please like, please subscribe. We love you all. Today and this week, we are talking all about planning, including planning your entire season, how you can do that right out of the gate, right now as you're doing tryouts, plus how to plan practices and how to plan the rest of your tournaments and playoffs as well. So we're going to talk about all three things in three different segments this week. Stick with us, subscribe to the channel. Let's do this.
Views from the Bucket.
All right, welcome back to Bucket Bites, coaches. I am thrilled you are back, and thank you for your support in the first few episodes of Bucket Bites. We appreciate it. Listen, we're talking today about planning, and today is our topic around planning your season. If you're doing tryouts right now, which a lot of you I know are, if you're not, and tryouts aren't until the winter or whatever, that's fine too. But we need to do this, and you're going to need to look at your whole season once you have your team set so that you can plan properly and actually execute on some success throughout the season. Now, we all know that seasons change. We also have players that change, skill levels change, all the different things happen. So we got to even plan for that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in this first segment. So let's go. So planning for your entire season is all about knowing your athletes and knowing what your team is like currently as you go into the season. So you've got to be able to define your program's orientation. What have you got right now that you can, what information do you have that you can help to start to plan the season? How many practices are we going to have? What segments of the season are we going to identify? How often are we going to practice every week? Now, some of this is going to change, as I say, when you see performance, when you see wins and losses, when you see performance in tournaments, when you see individual performances, things will have to be adjusted. So you also have to plan for that. It's super, super important. So what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? Well, one of the things you need to take away from this video is the ability to build your plan. You've got to build a plan for the season itself. And so let's talk a little bit about that. The first thing we need to do is understand what we are planning. So we're going to have a few different segments of our season, right, coaches? Like this is literally, we do something completely different indoors in the wintertime than we do outdoors on the diamond. So we really have to make sure that this is well planned out. And let's talk about that first segment, which I would say is your preparation period. And the number of weeks between the first practice session and the first regular official competition, that first regular season game, that's kind of that prep period, right? That could be your indoor training. That could be your prepping of assistant coaches. That could be all your parent meetings and getting everybody set up with somebody to run Game Changer and somebody to do a parent rep sort of role, that type of thing. This is kind of your preparatory unofficial competition. Maybe the players are competing for different positions and things like that in the off season, or when you're doing indoor workouts, those types of things. It's really the beginning of our program. It's considered part of that preparation period. And so that's your preparation period where you go indoors. These are the types of things where you're going to want to plan practices, but they're not going to be the same. Like, are you going to have to jog through a school hallway? Are you going to have to do different stretches because the space isn't big enough? Can you throw in the place where you are? Are you able to hit in the place where you are? I know some schools don't let you hit in their gyms if you're using a school. If you're using a baseball dedicated facility, how much is that going to cost you to rent it? How much is that going to cost your players per player? What are these types of things that you can identify early on in your preparation period that'll allow you to prepare parents better, allow you to prepare yourself better, and ultimately prepare the team better? Now, the biggest thing at this time of the year is this is your real opportunity to get out ahead of everyone else, right? One of the things that I did at 10U that worked really, really well with our coaches, we have really, really great, I'm going to give him a shout out, Jess Koulas, really, really great pitching coach, and developed this amazing throwing program that he started in the 10U level. And when he started it at the preparation period. He started it in the indoor workouts, and it was, again, a very dedicated, very thorough throwing progression. But one of the things and one of the visions for that was, and at 10U, where we are, 10U is the first time they pitch. I know at younger levels in some states and in provinces that they do pitch earlier than that. But in Ontario, they pitch at 10 and they start at 10. So these are guys coming in with no pitching experience whatsoever. Now, kudos to Jess, who also did this at the end of our 9U season to kind of get them prepared for this a little bit. But there had been an off season in between, and that off season obviously took away from what they knew about the throwing program. Had to restart it. He restarted it. It was much more detailed, and the pitching was a big focus. Now, one of the greatest things that happened to us in that season is that pitching was no one else's focus. Every competitor, every team that had been working at 8U, 9U without pitching, we're going to get to pitching later. But where we gave the advantage or had the advantage was to have this throwing program that Jess created, but then also start to throw bullpens in the gym. Measure it out, get the right distance, the right pitching distances, and have them throw some bullpens. Just a few pitches. I think we started at 20 pitches in the beginning, and we got to about 50, 60 pitches by the time we went outdoors, progressing up above and over and above that every single week. And then when we hit the ground running against our competition in the season, we were winning. We were dominating, because even though our bats were about the same as everybody else, the pitching was so far ahead of everybody else that by June we had a tremendous record. Now, we fell back as people caught up and things like that, and we actually learned from a mistake we made that year. And really, we made the same mistake in 11U and corrected it this year at 12U, which was we can't hear hit in our schools. We really can't. We can't hit because of the damage that it could cause to the different gyms. And oftentimes here in Canada, we do have baseball facilities. We have one right here. We're very lucky to have Centerfield Sports. In London, there's also the batter's box. There's a couple places in London that can do those things and support our players. But at that time, we didn't do them. And so we couldn't hit in the school. So we really didn't get our hitters really all that well prepared. We hit into a net. We hit off of a tee. We did wiffle ball home run derbies. But getting outside, we weren't as ready as some other teams for that. Now, luckily, we had that pitching advantage, as I said before. But that planning and that preparation should be something that you think about as well. And that is booking batting practices. We did that this year. We did use one of those facilities. We booked it weekly. We got a sponsor to cover those things, so that it did not happen to really cost the parents anything extra, and that was good because this was our Cooperstown year, and so there were lots of other costs going on there. So to have a sponsor cover it was great. It gave us, though, a real distinct advantage, and we ripped off 17 wins in a row at the very beginning of our season because we used this preparation period to prepare our pitchers, just as we did in 10U, 11U, but also to now prepare our hitters and correct that mistake we had made before. And we did that through the planning and learning process. And that's why if I can share this stuff with you in these segments, I think this is great because you can get around it right at 10U, 9U, 8U, wherever you start your pitching, and at any level when it comes to hitting. Get some batting practices, get some cage time. It'll set you up tremendously for the beginning of your season. Because when we get to that competition period, and that competition period is one thing, most coaches like to plan their practices as they go. Like next week, we're going to do this, that, and the other thing. One of the things that I try to do at the beginning of a season, also because it just helps me time-wise, is when I know I'm getting into the competition period and I know I'm going to have a weekly practice, I have a list of things that I try to complete or try to get the players to complete and learn throughout the year. These are just the basics. These are the things this year. A big one was rundowns, right? We wanted to make sure we learned how to do what happens when you get in a pickle, both as the runner and obviously as the fielders. And how do we teach that? How do we teach it? One catch, one throw, one tag. That's the goal of a rundown. How do you get there? And how do you teach a 12-year-old to do that? So those types of things were on the list. I created that list. These are things we have to cover this year. But we all know as coaches that things happen in games, things happen throughout the season where we're going to have to adjust on the fly and we're going to have to practice other things within the practice. So one of the things I would recommend for your competition period, and these are the number of weeks between the first regular season game and all your tournaments and the last competition of the year, that last tournament you're going to have, whether that's playoffs, state championships, national championships, provincial championships, whatever it is you're playing. This is that period, that end from beginning of competition to the end of competition. But you need to plan this before you even get to that preparation period to some degree, because it just makes it so much easier. You pull out your practice plans for the year and you know what you want to cover on a basic level. I always planned a half an hour of practice of something new. We were always going to do something new. So we had our primary warm-up. run, stretch, throw. That happened every day, every game, every practice. That was planned and ready to go. Make sure that's ready to go right at the beginning of the season. That's 25 minutes of your practice right there. Right. Sometimes a little longer, especially in the early going, or especially at the younger levels where you're teaching the throwing progressions. Takes a little bit longer. So there's that. Then we did about a half an hour of new stuff for our practices, and then get into some of the stuff that maybe you had to work on from this week's games, right? And make sure there's, all of these things can be planned out early. Like you can plan your water breaks early. You can plan all of the debriefs and intros to practices early, just so that you know what you're going to talk about. And there's so many coaches I see just do the practices willy-nilly. So many coaches that don't even have a practice plan, and this is all stuff you can cover really early on before you're really busy scheduling things, exhibition games, regular season games, playoffs, tournaments, all of that stuff. Now all of a sudden you're too busy, you can't plan a practice. If you do it all at the beginning of the season as part of this planning period, this is going to give you a distinct advantage as a coach throughout the season, because then your practices are ready. All you have to do is add in the things you need to work on from game situations that you're seeing as a coach. You have a planned half an hour of new stuff. You've got your planned warm up. You know about your intro and your debrief. You got a little cheer at the end. You give the kids some jobs to do while they're out there doing them, and while they're out there practicing, make sure they put in the bases, take the bases out. That's not something you should have to do as a coach. These are things that hey, you want to play on my team, you want to be competitive. These are some of the things you're going to have to do throughout the season as a player. So those types of things should all be written as part of your plan and shared with the parents if you can in a parent meeting, to have so that they have an idea of what the plan is for the season. And one of the things that we have to also think about is that transition period between the end of the season and all competition, that number of weeks between the last competitions that the athletes are playing in and that will take part in, and the last supervised contact that you will have with them. That number of weeks, some teams don't even have this transition period. There is no transition period in the program. Maybe there's no supervised practice sessions. For us, we're going to do a ring collection thing for what we got at Cooperstown. There's lots of different little things we're doing, but we're not actually practicing. But maybe you hold a parent game, maybe parents versus kids, different things like that. Make it fun. You've been competitive all year. You've been stressed all year about your playoffs and your tournaments. It's a lot of times fun to try and do some of those things. So that's that transition period between the end of the season and tryouts. And a lot of teams don't have this, and that's fine. A lot of you aren't guaranteed to be the same coach of the same team next year, and that's fine. And so you wouldn't use this transition period. But if you do, it's there for you, and it's it is absolutely something to think about. And then, one of the things you should do is have a planning calendar. So we talked about the preparation period. What does that look like? Let's have a planning calendar so that we know the preparation period starts mid-January and it goes to, say, last weekend of April. Okay. And so we know in here, this is where we're booking these batting practice. This is where we're focusing on pitching indoors. This is where we're getting some opportunity to prepare for the season. That's the preparation period. Then we have our competition period, let's say first week of May to the first weekend in September, something like that. That is your competition period. That's when you would plan and have all of those practices planned out. Obviously, rain, weather, other things are going to get in the way. You won't have as many practices as you plan to have, but at the same time, have the plan. Be ready. Boy, will this make you feel much better. And then have that calendar out and ready to go. If there's a transition period at the end too, make sure you plan for that. What are we going to do after our state championships? Are we going to have a party? Are we going to have a parents versus kids game? Are we going to do different little fun things as a team, or is it just over? And that's fine if it is too. Maybe there is no transition period. So, and then it's off to tryouts again in October or late September. So these are the types of things you need to, as a competitive coach, be really good at planning. And the better you are at this, the more service you are to players. Okay, so this is the biggest thing too. You're trying to create a love of the game. You're trying to actually develop these players, and you're also trying to make sure that you have a plan that things flow throughout the season so that you can have success. It's not always about winning in competitive baseball, but I will tell you, winning's an important part. Your kids want to win. They don't want to lose every game, but you also want to develop them. So the best way to do that is to have a really solid plan, especially in the preparation period, but even during your practices throughout the season. And when you have that plan pre-planned out, that's huge for you as a coach because you're already halfway there. And all you have to do is plug in the things you're seeing at games into those practices, and that's it. And you have plans, and everything moves smoothly. Have jobs for every single one of your coaches. There is nothing I can stress more about my coaching staff than how great they were at all having a skill that they loved. I mentioned Jess with pitching, but there was Matt with hitting. There was Tom with base running and also helping out with pitching and hitting. There was Dylan doing all the catching and helping out with the pitching and the base running and was our third base coach. We had and have a phenomenal coaching staff that all have jobs to do in a practice that will make the practice flow so much easier. And then you can plan for different stations. You can plan to make sure that the kids are busy the entire practice. So planning. We'll talk about practice planning next. That was kind of a segue, I guess, right there. But we'll talk in the next segment about practice planning. That's how to plan your season. Do that first. In a couple days, you'll see a segment on planning practices. Good luck.